show is some special information that we're going to have to learn this evening for the good of our economical development in your house, in your locality, and the country at large, or even Africa. We welcome you back from the Serena Conference Center, where we took you live for the State of the Nation address, where His Excellency the President was trying to account for whatever they have managed to do as government since we started the last financial year that is ending this June. Yes, our topic this evening in the special talk show we are holding is to do with free zone. What free zones are, what a free zone is, and how it is managed in Uganda. What do we need to do with it? How can we tap into the opportunities in it? Is what is going to be our focus this evening. So join me, welcome. I have a lady and a gentleman from the Uganda Free Zones Authority. I have the Executive Director himself, Mr. Jabo Richard. Sir, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
He came along with the Vice Chairperson of the Board of Directors, Miss Grace Achire Labong. You're most welcome, Madam.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'll start with you, the Executive Director. What should one understand in the term free zone? Let us first understand it. We shall move on simply.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Free zones are export promotion schemes which many countries have put in place in order to augment the performance on the side of exports. Because when you look at the perspectives on development, many countries are looking to have a balance of trade surpluses. What that means is that you want, as a country, to be exporting more than
the imports.
And so, in the process, you incentivize everyone who is going to be exporting under a certain arrangement. So a free zone, in essence, is a geographical area within a country where goods and raw materials, or even plant and machinery, in other words, what goes into the production process, comes in free of duty, in this case customs duty.
Okay.
And then what is exported from there also goes out free of customs duty.
Okay.
So free zones could also be areas where goods are landed, reconfigured and repackaged as a transit point for export to an external market. Because along the value chain, there are gains to be made.
Those areas are geographically earmarked.
Yes. Correct.
That, for example, whatever maize that comes from UBC, for example, and it is exported to Rwanda, for example, will not pay customs duty. Am I understanding you very well?
Yes. In a sense, you're right. However, there are also other conditions under which you can
tell us briefly so that we get to understand very well.
Okay. Those conditions, in the case of Uganda, we are our mandate as Uganda Free Zones Authority is embedded or enshrined within the Free Zones Act. And that Free Zones Act tells you that for anyone to benefit under the Free Zone scheme or to participate under the Free Zone scheme, you must be an exporter of a minimum of 80% of your output. Remember, this scheme is designed as an export promotion scheme. So you want to ensure that whoever is operating under that scheme actually does or conducts their activities according to the intention from the policy perspective of government.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'll come to the Vice Chairperson, Board of Directors. So he hinted on what the authority does and how it came into existence. We expect more of that from you. Tell us about the authority and what you do as far as ensuring free zones in Uganda is concerned.
Okay. The free zones in Uganda is, as he said, is a custom-free area where you bring in your goods, and these are designated areas. It can be a location which is designated.
By the way, Madam Vice Chairperson and himself, for example, in Uganda, do we have examples of those areas yet in Uganda?
Yes.
Can we just get to know them?
Well, we have quite a number of free zones in Uganda.
Yes.
Most of them are privately owned free zones because we do provide licenses to anybody who wants to operate in a private free zone. One that I think of recent has been really of high importance is the one in Tororo, Dongsong. Dongsong is a free zone. Now, Dongsong is an area that has been designated to produce a number of products, and these products, most of it would be produced for export.
Okay.
So they got a license to produce to operate a free zone. We have most of our flowers exporters, because most of the flowers that we grow in these countries are actually going out for export. Most of our flowers are designated as free zones.
Okay.
Flower exporters. Most of them have licenses as free zones. So that is some of the examples that you see that's already available within the country. So there are quite a number of them.
So does designating flowers broaden the scope from the geographical look to now business sense, that we can even allow flower growers,
yes,
even in Kumi, not only in Kachiri or Wakiso, but even in Kumi, Kotido, or wherever?
I think the ED alluded to this fact that the key condition for a free zone to be designated as a free zone, it means that what you produce, 80% of that must be exported, not sold within the country.
Okay.
So if you have flower in a flower processing plant or a flower farm in Kumi, which is targeting the export market, 80% of it is going to go out in then you have a right to get a water license.
Okay, I diverted you. Let us go back to the authority.
Yeah. So the authority has been put in place basically to help the country to improve on its export competitiveness. I think we all know that Uganda, as at this point in time, we are a net importer. We import more than we export.
True.
And so to be able to encourage more companies to come in and produce within Uganda and then be able to export, they must be given incentives. And most of these incentives can be fiscal. Fiscal is really tax-related incentives. Other incentives can be non-tax, but providing them with access to land, access to road network. It's really an established area, access to water, access to all the facilities and the utilities, which is given to them, and then they can be able to export,
okay,
so that they can become more competitive. Yeah.
Okay. How legal are free zones? What is the legal position of free zones? For example, would they allow products that are illegally produced in a certain area as long as they are exports? And in case of such things, give us a picture. Let me just phrase it this way. Give us a picture of how legally free zones and their operations can fit in our Ugandan business kind of industry.
Thank you, Malcolm. Okay, first of all, let me say that anyone can export. In other words, you can have your business where you sell 70% on the local market, and then you export maybe 30% to Rwanda or wherever you choose to do. But that would not mean that you have to be under the free zone scheme arrangement. But if you're going to operate within a free zone, first of all, you must be registered. You must register your company for the sole purpose of operating under the free zone scheme. I think that one goes without debate. Number two, you must also have a statutory instrument which is issued by the Honorable Minister of Finance. Now, the legal framework underpinning the free zone scheme is actually the Free Zones Act. This act is premised on what is provided for at the ESC, because when we're doing the protocol for the establishing the customs union. Under Article 29, Article 30, and Article 31, it provides for export promotion schemes, and we are mandated at country level, at the level of partner states, to implement the legal framework at the EAC level. So Kenya has an EPZ Act, but they've also enacted a Special Economic Zones Act. Rwanda the same, Tanzania the same. You'll notice that within the region, many countries have free zones related acts. On top of that, under the EAC Customs Management Act, because I've talked about the protocol establishing the customs union, but then under the Customs Management Act, you also have provisions there under I think it's Article 14 and 15, which also provide for the export promotion zones, export processing zones, and free port zones. Then, of course, you know that laws have to be accompanied by regulations.
Definitely.
Yes. So in the regulatory framework in Uganda, we have regulations. We have regulations which were passed in 2016, free zones regulations. We also have at the EAC level regulations governing the export processing zones and also the free port zones. So that is the legal and regulatory framework underpinning the activities of the free zone scheme in Uganda.
Okay.
Yes.
Internationally, have they worked anywhere? Do we have any record of where there is success registered from free zone operations and systems?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the countries that have developed fast, like China, for instance, free zone, they have a number of free zones. I think one which comes into mind is Guangzhou. It's a big city. This a whole city almost is a free zone processing area where anybody can come in and set up operation as long as it is for the export market. So China, South Korea, he's just talked about in the East Africa here we have Kenya. Kenya was one of the first actually to set up the export free zone, export processing free zone. And then you have Rwanda, you have Tanzania, they also have their own. So this is something that has worked. You have South Africa. South Africa has quite a number of them, a number of free zones in all the different provinces. So it's one of those I call it one of those tools that the government realized that can actually help its economy to grow and to be able to reduce that gap between import and export. Okay. So yeah, it has worked quite a lot, and that's why you see everybody is trying to set up that free zone in their country. Almost most countries within the world.
Yeah, but when you look at, for example, how would you compare the success in African countries, for example, and Beijing, the China you were talking about, and other countries, for example?
I'm talking about Kenya, for instance. Kenya, if I don't know how far you've, I mean, if you've been to Kenya, if you are, they have a free zone that they set up. I think it was one of the, I can't remember the exact date, but I do remember it was in the 1990s. They started that a long time ago. They set up a free zone, a place where businesses can come and set up free zone at Athi River, just as you're going to the airport. And now it has developed as one of the most developed industrial area of Kenya, and it's employing a lot of Kenyans. It's bringing a lot of export income for Kenya. So I'm not talking about China now, I'm talking about just next door to us. Rwanda has done quite a great deal in terms of also putting up a free zone. South Africa, which is close to us here, is not too far away from us. It's really...
because where I asked you to compare, to take a comparison of the African neighbors and the Chinese you were talking about, I think the Chinese, Japan, and all those other people have more other factors that back up their production chains compared to our ways here that still have the rudimentary element. What do you think about that? Because we may have the free zones, but again, that may be affected by the way we produce.
You see, one of the things that I think the free zone offers is to be able to attract that Chinese to come and be able to set up his operation in Uganda. There are certain factors that are much more better in this country. There are certain raw materials, there are certain products that would be best produced in Uganda than produced in China. So if we have free zones in Uganda, then we are able to also attract companies from China. We are able to attract companies from different parts of the world to come and do their processing here for the export market. So that's how we gain from their knowledge and gain from their experiences.
Okay. Can I give you some perspective?
Good.
I'll start from the global scene. Right now, as we speak, we know that the export trade in itself is hitting the $18 trillion mark. We know that in terms of import trade, we are hitting $16 trillion mark. Now, in terms of exports, out of the 18 trillion we are talking about 4 trillion of global trade exports is from free trade zones. That is a significant thing. It is way above 20%. Now, if you break down the 4 trillion, you realize about 65% of that is from the Asian countries. Then about $500 billion is from the Middle East, and then the rest of the world can share out the 1 trillion. We're just talking about free trade zones. So this goes to illustrate the relevance of free zones in global trade. When we come to Africa, you know very well that the share of global trade that Africa participates in is only 2%. But even as we speak right now, we come back to Kenya. Kenya, from their free zones program, they are exporting to the tune of $1 billion. Now that shows you the kind of contribution which free zones can make in the development of many countries. And remember, for instance, Kenya's program has been, it's coming to 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is how relevant free zones are. And they are growing in prominence because the world, all over the world now, we are looking at greater competition, and markets are getting more sophisticated. Production processes are getting more sophisticated. Let us go to China, because China at one point was...
I'm looking at them with all the technology in their production, and come back to our handheld hose in our production system.
China was where we are at this point about 40 years ago.
Yes.
Now, at that time, the economy was very close. They piloted the free zone scheme in areas like Shenzhen, that is in southern China, in Fujian province, in Shanghai recently, about 10 years ago, they were piloting, there was Shanghai pilot free zone. Now, why were they doing a pilot? They were using it as a test bed of policy. Now, this policy was really geared towards production for export. We know very well that the Chinese society of about 40 years ago, that was the time of maybe Deng Xiaoping, that was around his time, when they started really opening up. You realize that at that time they were using very rudimentary methods. In fact, they were relying mostly on low-cost labor. As we speak right now, employing a Chinese worker is because China has moved places. It is very, very difficult. So we see companies moving to countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam. No, China is no longer a place where you're going to say, because of the low-cost labor, you use that as an advantage. Because labor is a factor of production.
Yes.
And also the cost of labor is one of the major
it's a determinant, a serious one.
But when you're looking at low-cost labor, you also have to ensure that that labor is skilled.
Yeah. To
have skilled labor, it means that you're going to pay a little bit more for that. China is moving away from the traditional low-cost production into a different, it's getting more sophisticated. That's why we are seeing these arguments about Huawei, and they're moving into technology, into services.
In that very line, Mr. Edi, so how long does it have to take us to score such goals?
The success of free zones depends on so many things. First of all, there has to be a thorough analysis from the country perspective. In other words, when you're designing your national development plans, every program that is not within the development plan of a nation, it means that it cannot be prioritized. So free zones have to be aligned with the national development aspirations. Number two, there has to be skilling, because if you're going to do production, and we've seen this in the oil sector, we talk about skills in tourism, we talk about skills, even just education, any service, any production process. The other day I was speaking to people at UMA. They are saying, we have this kind of machinery, we don't know which people can operate this kind of machinery. Our machinery is operating at half capacity if they're doing well. So there are so many ingredients. There has to be skilling, there has to be a general business environment which is very conducive. By that, and we are taking steps as a country by having more generation of electricity.
The other thing I'm looking at, this is an operation or a system or an arrangement that involves tax waivers in what you called intensive
fiscal incentives.
Fiscal incentives.
Yes.
Thank you for the reminder. Now, how does it affect the government envelope and the budget and things to do with that when it takes away some money that government would get in form of customs duty and things like that?
So many countries actually do what I would call a cost benefit
because if
analysis.
other countries are embracing it, how do they manage to do away with that kind of small income for the good?
Okay, many times you'll have to do a cost benefit analysis. If, for instance, I have, we know that Uganda is an agrarian economy. But then so many times there are arguments that we produce and we cannot get much. And I've had the president say this so many times, that we produce a lot of coffee and we sell our coffee for $1 maybe per kilogram. And then the person who buys from us processes it along the value chain, and they're able to extract up to $14 for the same amount of coffee that we have produced. I'm just using that as one example. Why is it, for instance, that Switzerland, which does not produce any cocoa, is one of the best exporters of chocolate? How much do they get from that chocolate? So when we are talking about the costs in terms of tax revenue, along the value chain in many countries, it has been established that actually when a country specializes or even diversifies its export portfolio, the gains can outweigh the costs. Now, of course, we are cognizant of so many studies.
So government invests in kind.
Yes.
Yes, you have, it is a give and take. I'm cognizant of so many studies, for instance, from the World Bank, where they say investors will not locate in a place based on tax incentives and what. That is an investment decision based on location. But if we are a country, for instance, which has raw materials, there is a lot of raw material seeking FDI, or even not only FDI, but also domestic investors who can add value, given the right business environment and given the right conditions.
Okay, I'm sure a number of business people are watching and they are actually moving with us now to the right path. How do we invest into, how do we tap into investment opportunities that are around free zone in the first place, and who is eligible, by the way? Let us start with, how do we invest? Here I am. How do I tap into the opportunities that are embedded within the arrangement? I'm still with you, Mr. Idi.
Yes. Number one is knowledge. A lot of, and this is not to take away anything from our private sector, but you realize you've had a lot of discussions where people say, why do we build so many arcades? Why don't we build industries? But it is because of lack of knowledge. But we also know that the private sector is very good at sniffing investment opportunities. The challenge that I see, and which is very common, not only in Uganda but in Africa, is that many times they want to see government leading, and then they know maybe this will work. So as an authority, we recognize, and the studies we've done, even the visits we have done, we have recognized that, for instance, Vice Chairperson has talked about Kenya. When Kenya, they set up the EPZ at Athi River, what happened then was that it became a catalyst for so many private sector developers to establish similar undertakings. Now, a free zone can be even this room, as long as there is economic activity taking place and production going on, and the output is for export. So you don't need to have huge chunks of land. You can have a small facility, but the overriding factor is export. So the demonstration effect from government is very important. So as we speak right now, we are in a process of establishing some facility somewhere in Wakiso district, and we'll be talking about that in due course. We've just done the process of land acquisition, and then we're going to go into the development phase, where we'll provide facilities for different operators to come and operate in there. Why that is very important is because you want to minimize the cost of doing business in an organized environment.
Who has to share this information or take it to the investors so that they get to know about these opportunities, that actually there is an opportunity for you to produce whatever which you can export without paying some form of taxes?
Actually,
is that someone being selfish with this information?
No.
Not really. Not really.
I'm not pointing at anyone.
Nobody's being selfish.
And no one should be guilty.
No. Okay. Of course, as an institution, we have the first responsibility to promote free zones, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, is that so that everybody can know that there is such an opportunity for any Ugandan who want to be able to operate and for export. There's an opportunity that is available. Now, we are the first, but we also work with partner institutions like Uganda Investment Authority. We work with all the other trade support institutions who do investment promotion. We provide them with information, so there is a partnership between ourselves and a number of these institutions. So yeah, the information is not exclusive to some people. This is really a public.
Yes, this one also has some economics. I don't know who will take it, but somebody should just pick it. Is it necessarily obvious that because I'll have some exemption of some taxes, then I'll make profit?
Malcolm, that's a wonderful question.
That I've been given a waiver of some customs duty. Is it definite that then I'll make the profit in business?
Absolutely not.
No.
Because, you know, the most important thing that we have to note is that before we issue you, before you even qualify to operate in a free zone, we must assess your plans, and we must assess your projections and everything, and look at different variables to ensure that we are licensing an enterprise that is going to be profitable. That is very, very important, because business has costs. And then if you don't have markets, if you don't have information and what, we'll basically interrogate you and say, but how do you expect to be commercially viable? That is one of the before the minister signs off that statutory instrument, as an authority, we must assure him.
So do you only assess my capacity, or you can as well empower me to tap into the opportunity and as well make a profit from it?
No, we do assess your capacity. We have to assess your capacity. But even when we assess your capacity, we may realize that there are certain gaps which can be filled in order to make you perform much better. There is some information which you can utilize in order to perform much better. So yes, we shall give you support, but also the overriding factor is that this must be a commercially viable undertaking.
Who are the people eligible, for example, to be part of free zones in the Ugandan setting as we speak?
Everybody,
anybody who has the capacity.
Okay.
Foreigners, because there's also this perspective that government comes up with policies and schemes only to support foreign direct investment. But I can assure you that the biggest beneficiaries in any economy are the locals. And in many countries where we've seen success, as long as foreign participation is higher than the domestic participation,
it's not anything to celebrate.
Because there'll be a lot of capital flight, there'll be a lot of disgruntlement, and there are also social sentiments. But where the domestic private sector has uptake of whatever government is doing, you realize that the benefits will be far greater.
Let us take a picture into your operations, especially in as far as relationship with the investors that come for such opportunities is concerned. You talked about giving licenses, taking on assessments of who can really take what opportunity, who do you partner with. Let us start with the investors. Do you give licenses? Who can take a license from you and to do what?
Well, we do provide a number of licenses, and free zones licenses are divided into 3 different types of licenses.
Yes.
One is what we call an operator licenses. So you have the capacity to be able to set up just a place where people can be able to operate, and you build it up, and then it's ready for anybody to come and be able to process. We have also a developer. I mean, that's a developer's license. You develop the area, and anybody can come in, and you get money from the rental that comes in from the people who want to process within your free zones. Not everybody wants to go into that process of development. Or you can be an operator. You bring in the goods, you process, and then you export. That's an operating license. Then we have a management license. You want to manage a free zone. Basically, your job is to make sure that they follow up the regulations as is stipulated under the Act. So a free zone is set up, and then you get a management license, a license to manage the free zone on behalf of
the authority.
Yeah, the authority.
Or the developer.
Or the developer, depending some.
Okay, so you are already in existence,
yeah,
but a free zone can have a developer.
Yes.
That one takes a license from you.
No.
No.
A developer is someone who sets up the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But they can say, we want to develop this place, and then we shall bring in different operators.
Okay.
Then they can also say that we just have maybe the finances, but we can partner with a certain company which has this, just like a hotel. Someone has a lot of money, and then they say, let me bring in Marriott Group or Protea or Hilton to manage my the facilities. You're the developer of the hotel, but you have a management partnership with somebody who comes into
who can help you score your targets
and make it profitable. Yes.
Okay. So what else? We want to know more about how you operate and deal with this. Where do I break rules, and what happens to me if I'm an investor that is under you as the Free Zones Authority?
Now, and that's very important. Remember, at the beginning, we're telling you what a free zone is. A free zone is a customs controlled area. Because you're bringing in inputs into a production process free of duty, customs must be in the know, customs must clear. Customs must also facilitate, because one of the roles of customs is trade facilitation. And this role is very clear in all the legislation at national level and even ESC level. So customs plays a very big role in that. You cannot just, and if there is, we've seen this in some countries where some illicit activities take place. Within the law, there are some activities which are not permitted within the free zones. So if you're caught breaking the law, that becomes a criminal offense. But the people that we license, we make sure, and in the process of license, we make sure that we involve customs, including doing some background checks.
Okay, let me take this to Madam Vice Chairperson. In whatever we have discussed, I've had a lot in partnership with UIA, in partnership with other government agencies. How do they come into your work? What brings the fusion in whatever you do? For example, with UIA, yes, it is the investment authority. Actually, one would think would take you to be one entity. So how do you partner with them? What do they add?
We complement each other. Our core niche is export-oriented processing, while Uganda Investment Authority is basically about bringing in any foreign direct investment or local investment. So ours is strictly export. And the terms, the condition for us, for you to be able to be eligible within the free zone is that 80% of what you produce must be for export. But with Uganda Investment Authority, you can be able to produce anything, and it can be 20% for export, 80% is for the local domestic market. That you cannot do it within a free zone. It's only Uganda free zone that can be able to. I mean, that is what we cannot give you. We cannot give you if you're producing for less than 80% at the moment. Of course, that is one of the things. I think I wanted to also just basically bring that to perspective, because the ED you talked about what are some of the rules, and maybe what are some of the challenges. The challenges, of course, is being the condition that you must produce 80% of your products for export.
How is that a challenge? Because I thought it's just a rule.
It is a rule.
It's a requirement.
It is a rule, but one of the things that we found out in most of the countries, like in Kenya right now, he talked about the special economic zones. Special economic zones, and this is really an upgrade of what I would call it an upgrade of the export processing zones. Now, in some of those, the amount that has got to go for the export is much lower. So you can sell up to 60% in the export market and 40% within the local market. There's quite a big local market here. And to a large degree, a number of organizations would want to come, a number of entities would want to come and produce to also sell within the national and the regional markets. Okay. But the 80%, 20% rules limits their access to that market. So that's a challenge to
I don't know, you will correct me on this. I think Mr. Idi, you will correct me on this. Wouldn't one think there is an element of duplication of roles in what you have to do, and URA or UIA? How different are you from these other entities?
Well, we get that a lot. Now, you realize that by the time we came up with the Free Zones Act, there was a lot of benchmarking globally, because there is greater competition, especially on the export side. Countries are giving this their utmost attention. In fact, as we speak, it is cutthroat competition. And some people even say that some incentives which are provided, it is getting like to a race to the bottom. However, it is not only the fiscal incentives that are available to exporters. There are also non-fiscal incentives. They will tell you that free zones must be the best places to do business for anyone involved in exports. In other words, it provides you a conducive environment. Like Madam Vice Chairperson just said, if you're a person who can operate within a free zone, why not operate where you have cheaper logistics, cheaper utilities, a more conducive environment where even customs facilitation is on site? That whole arrangement for it.
Okay.
Yes.
In addition to that, what other plans are there? We just have 2 minutes to leave the set.
Okay. In a nutshell, we have plans to establish a facility close to the airport. We're working with CAA on that, and that one will be targeting people who want to export through the airport.
Yes.
Especially light manufacturing and perishables, that kind of thing. We also have plans to establish, as I mentioned earlier on, a free zone around Kasanji. Since we have very little time, I'll not go into the details, but we are undertaking preliminary activities on the same. In Jinja, we are working with Trademark East Africa to establish a trade logistics hub. And right now we're at the stage of the feasibility study, and in a short period of time we'll be expounding more on that.
Okay, just a comment from you, Madam Vice Chairperson, as we wind up. We have a second.
I think for me, I would just like to tell a lot of the businesses that are looking at the export market that this is an opportunity not only for foreigners, it's also for the local investors.
Okay.
So it's free for all.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Jabo Richard, the Executive Director, Uganda Free Zones Authority, and Ms. Grace Achire Lebong, the Vice Chairperson of the Board of Directors, Uganda Free Zones Authority. We have a piece for you to watch about exactly what they do and whatever we have been discussing here. It is just briefed in a few minutes, but a video that will give you more information, more highlighting information about free zones in Uganda. My name is Michael Jordan Lukomwa, and from here we'll just say good night. Just watch this piece as you move towards the news. Bye-bye.